What's up, guys? Welcome back to Eastern Shore Talk, your podcast for all things self care and movies. If this is your first time tuning in, we're glad to have you. We are on episode 51. I'm Jay Watson.
And I'm Cathy Castle.
And I'm Chris Moore.
Yeah.
And as Cathy and I like to do a regular check ins with her and I, but our friend Chris is out in California going through some stuff, so we thought we'd check in with him. So we're glad to have Chris join us this week.
I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, Chris. So, I noticed that a lot of people have seen that Jay has posted that you were going to be on the podcast. So I've even gotten some private messages like, is he okay? How's Chris? So you got a lot of local friends and fans that
I love it.
are probably going to tune in,
best.
right? Because everybody knows you're out there somewhere. And are you out there? Are you okay? Is the house okay?
Sadly, I actually live in the Palisades, so it's a much more famous place now than it was before. But I think we're okay. My family, just quick details. Everybody's all right. My house did not burn down. We got a lot of smoke and ash. And so we've been having to do the remediation, which you may, cleaning it and stuff like that. And then, we happen to, be in a canyon where the water is not safe. And so we have moved back into our house about 3 days ago. So it was 45 days out of the house and sort of moving around and you just never know how long it was going to take. And some of it is, and I think this is the craziest thing about these things is everyone has a point of view about what you should do. That you should move. You should never go back to your house. You shouldn't be anywhere near it. Don't take a shower. Don't do whatever. Like you're not sure. And the government, it sort of overplays the safety and so you have to start making your own decisions on what's safe, what's not, what are you comfortable with? We had one neighbor, I live in a canyon that's right next to, it's sort of what they would say south of the Palisades, which is a little village. It's sort of like, it's probably bigger than if you put all Talbot County together, but it's, it's very suburban. It's very relaxed. It's sort of naturey. It's right on the ocean. And we're very fortunate and people like it a lot. And Cathy's best friend, Martin Short, lives there. And I believe his house burned down. I think he was on the news the other day talking about it. It's the kind of place that's sort of still a little bit old fashioned. It's families, that kind of stuff. My son went to Palisades High School, Charlie, that school burned. And
he's a senior, right?
No, he graduated, but he's got a bunch of friends. And, the thing that, again, my family's fine and we're back there and it seems okay. We still, like I said, we have some water issues, but it's okay. And we feel very lucky. And if you want to, you can talk about what it feels like to not have the disaster happen to you that happened to everybody else. But it's also weird into the world. Like if you drive up to the Palisades, I can't really describe what it feels like to drive through a neighborhood where every single house burned down. Like you can't really understand from the pictures what it's like to look for 10 miles and all you see is burned down houses. Like it is a weird feeling. But a lot of my son's friends, a lot of our friends, their houses burnt to the ground. And one of the hardest things, again, just to share a little, is it happens out here. You get alerts on your phone that says, hey, be ready to evacuate. Hey, do whatever. And the truth of the matter is, it's like, what is it? The boy who cried wolf. Like you get so used to it that you're like, oh, okay. I'll throw a couple pair of underwear and maybe my toothbrush in the car and I'll go away. And it never occurs to you, you might be gone for 45 days. Like you're not, and what's even worse is you might never be able to come back. And so that's been the saddest part is a lot of my friends, you go back, the house burnt to the ground. It's not like half of it's still there and all their memories. I was talking to a buddy the other day And he said, I'm so sad we had these great pictures of our kids. And he actually researched that digital photography really became a big thing in 2014. So he has lots of pictures of his kids and people after 2014, literally has no pictures before 2014. Yeah. And he had a lot of pictures. And so then he says to me, oh, well, actually, because it's a neighborhood like this, he's like, I bet the neighbors have pictures of our kids. And then he realizes halfway through the sentence, neighbor's house burned down too. Mm. And he's just like, everything's gone. Like all of your problem solving things are affected by the fact that it's just the whole neighborhood, the stores, the grocery stores, the schools, the churches, they're gone, like gone. Not like we got to fix a wall or one room got some fire damage. They are to the earth burned down. And it's just, it's scary. And so that's my quick update for anyone who was wondering. We are so lucky and so fortunate, and, plan to be very helpful to people here and try to let people stay with us if they need to or do whatever. Once we have water, it's a little bit harder to host people when you don't have water. You can't take a shower or not supposed to take a shower. But in general, we've been very lucky.
So can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
My audio video was getting wonky. I don't know what was going on, but
I think it was your background, because remember, I couldn't.
That's right.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah, your background's gone now.
It's okay. Gone. Yeah. Anyway, the only.
Yeah.
You're not being recorded, but we can hear it talk to you.
Yeah.
Oh, she's gone.
All right, this is annoying. Anyway, now can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know why this is doing this. Anyway, I have friends in Miami that back in '92, they were devastated with Hurricane Andrew. They were right in that, and it was just rubble. Like they had to take orange spray paint and put a phone number on the rubble for the insurance companies to come identify. Of course, it was a little harder back then because we weren't quite into the technology as we are right now. But I think I even said it to them. Why would you live there? Why would you go back to that? Why would you rebuild? It's easier for us from afar because we're worried about people we love and care about, but it's home, right? And maybe you guys just become a little more resilient, a little more tough. And
well, we're in a weird spot because Jenna, my wife, and I had decided we were going to move to Long Island anyway this year. So part of that was that Hollywood's getting weird. Part of that was that our kids are out of the house and we're empty nesters and we don't need a big house anymore. Part of it was that, Long Island's closer to where our kids are and actually family and the Eastern Shore. And so we're in this where we said, listen, we don't want people to think we're less interested in the rebuild, but the rebuild's probably 3 to 5 year extravaganza.
Wow.
And we weren't planning on selling our house, but now we have friends. We're like, look, if you want our house, we'll give it to you. We'll sell it to you because we were leaving anyway. And there's a lot of these families. I mean, I don't think it's very hard. I bet hurricanes is similar where you just don't think of all the stuff that you have in your house until it's gone. And then you realize I just don't have any of it. I mean, it's one thing, shorts or pictures or, whatever, but it's like your medicine and your memories and your important papers and your, and you just sort of, it's gone. And so a lot of people are getting very excited about being part of the rebuild and think the Palisades will come around well. Some people think that it's going to be different because you'll probably be catering more to people who have too much money, which will make it a different kind of environment. Some people are worried they're going to have all kinds of crazy California rules about having to build fireproof houses, which I think is pretty hard to do. So, we're waiting, but for us, it was already a place that we were getting ready to say goodbye to. Now, even my son who went to Pali High said, I look forward to coming back there. Now I'm not sure I want to come back. I'd rather invite my high school buddies to come out to Long Island because we don't have to drive around all the places we used to go to that are burnt to the ground.
Wow.
The diners and the restaurants and the bars and for them, the gym that they played basketball in, and they're all damaged. And for a lot of his close friends, the houses are completely gone.
So you've lost community. You've lost your community.
And that's the thing is they don't, we still got National Guard here and, armed Hummers blocking the roads. Like, you can't just cruise by. You got to get permission. You got to wear masks. If you want to get out of your car, you got to wear a full hazmat suit. And part of that is because of the batteries. It was a community that had a lot of electric cars, a lot of solar panels, a lot of that kind of stuff, and all that stuff burnt. And it is not cool when that stuff burns. So, it's still a little bit of a zone up in the actual Palisades. As I said, my canyon's right south of it. And on the upper ledge toward the Palisades, there's 3 or 4 houses that burned down. That's why but weirdly, the fire just sort of went over the canyon. Like the wind was blowing so hard, it just went completely over our canyon. We all of us, help each other, and we're talking and all this technology for WhatsApp groups and whatnot. So we're in communication. We all feel so lucky because we're pretty sure, and the firemen have sort of confirmed it, that if one of our houses had caught on fire, it would have been like dominoes. And that's why those neighborhoods are burnt to the ground. Like 150 houses on a street are gone. And that's because the wind was so crazy that if you got flames, you couldn't stop it. It was going 50 miles an hour, fully on fire.
But where are people going? I mean, even for you, 45 days, that's a long time.
Yeah, we went all over. I mean, we stayed in 3 different hotels. We stayed in 2 different Airbnbs. We went back, we were going to go out to Long Island to the house we have for a little while, but then my son's school didn't want, my youngest son who still lives at home, Ike, his school didn't burn down because it's not up in the Palisades. So they wanted to have school. So he wanted to be at school because a lot of his friends, one of his best friends, house burnt to the ground. It was such a nice house. And so he wanted to come back. So we came back. But it's weird because other people went full bore, just rented a house for a year. We're just like, some are in what's called the South Bay, which is like Redondo Beach and Manhattan Beach and down there. Other people, there's neighborhoods. I have a good buddy from college who lives in my neighborhood who's in Montecito, which is sort of near Santa Barbara. And they took their kids, and all the other schools that were open were very cool about letting people just come in and start right where they were and do their best. And, I feel bad because a lot of these kids lived through COVID, so they're just like, everything keeps getting sort of messed up for them, but they're doing their best. I mean, people, you see the best and the worst of people. What's happened in my neighborhood recently is there's been a lot of looters. A lot of people just roll in, they pretend they're fixing a house, or they pretend, and because they know a lot of people haven't moved back. And, so they roll in, take stuff and leave, and no one's even going to know they did it until somebody moves back and then says, wait, where's my watch? Or what happened to all those earrings I had? Or what? And they're just gone,
See, it's funny watching the footage on TV, Chris, where, they'll take a drone or whatever and they'll kind of fly over an area. And it's, fires kind of happen everywhere in cities and towns where a house or a couple houses next to each other will kind of catch fire, but you don't see blocks and blocks and blocks of, it's not something. Hey, Cathy, if you drop out again, click on the new link.
I don't know. I did. I don't know what's going on with my computer.
It's your internet.
And I'm trying to turn on my, anyway, maybe.
The DOG turned off your internet.
Don't unplug anything like you did the one time.
I know. I'm trying to get on. I might get on another computer, but everything's not working today. I don't know why. We've been good lately too. We've been really good.
So, Chris, like aside from the logistical side of things, like whether you can speak for you and your family, but even if maybe others, like how are the folks out there from a mental health and kind of self care, kind of using navigating from that aspect of things?
Well, the Palisades where I am is a pretty well-to-do area. It's also, Altadena, where the other town that burned down, it's a little harder because they were smaller units and more concentrated. But I would say a lot of people are still in shock. Like if your daily routine got burnt to the ground and you're living in an apartment or you're living in sharing a house with another family or you're doing whatever, it hits you every day. What I remembered, and you guys may remember, we were all there together, but my mom's church in Easton, and I don't know if other people did, took in families from 3 Mile Island when they had that nuclear, accident out there. And I remember when we had 2 families living with us, and they were doing their best and they were trying to be good people, and but they were so sad that they might never ever get to go back to their house, and they may never, ultimately they did because it wasn't as bad as, or at least they said it wasn't as bad. Well, I guess we won't know, but I think there's a lot of that. I think that also, sadly, a couple of my friends group have been hit with sort of a rash of divorce in literally the last 25 days, that couples are reacting differently to what to do with their kids. They're reacting differently about how to solve these problems. They're in one case, they're finding out about financial situations that the other spouse have been lying about. Stuff like that comes up when your house burns down. And I think the reason they're being so drastic and just like, screw it, we're going to break up, right, is that you just feel like nothing's permanent. You just feel like nothing. I just want to go do something else because this is it's too much pain. And my therapist and my wife's therapist, we have different ones, but they both said the same thing about you got to give it time. Like, don't make any big life-changing decisions like a divorce, 20 days after your house burned down, right? And it's not just that. Had you been in the wrong place, you could have been killed. I mean, 30 people got killed, right? Like it changes your perspective a little bit. And I do think there's a lot of people who lived in the Palisades thinking they were in sort of a really special place that somehow was, protected by whatever, and to just watch it burn. And I think is there. And, there's a lot of the blaming going on, and will the mayor make it? And she just fired the fire chief, and there's all this stuff, but no one could have done anything. It was a perfect storm of, this wind is so dry. We had been so dry. Maybe it was a perfect storm in that we were a little arrogant that we built houses in places that we probably shouldn't have. But what I think is it's mostly shock, and it's making you take stock of everything in your life because you lost a lot. And you're trying to figure out, what do I want to rebuild? What don't I? A couple families that are in our same situation where we're about to be empty nest, like some of my son's friends, they're the youngest of the families, of the kids, are thinking about moving other places. Some friends of ours went and they've always wanted to live in the mountains, and they went and looked at some houses up in Colorado area. Another friend of mine has lived right near here, and his house didn't burn down, but he wants to go live on the beach down in the San Diego area. And, their kids are growing, and you think, oh, I got to sell my house. I got to move. It's a hassle. You're sort of stuck when something like this happens. You're like, I think La Jolla is nice. Maybe I should go down there. So, I don't know if everyone will follow through with this stuff. I don't know what will happen. I know right now there's lots of different thoughts and things, and the people whose houses didn't burn down also lost a fair amount of community. And the people who, don't really have ties, meaning they don't necessarily have like a day job, or they don't have a kid in school, there's a school in Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach area called Miracosta that is, very similar. And that area in the South Bay is pretty similar to the Palisades in some ways. And a lot of those kids just went down to Miracosta, and they rented houses on the beach, in the beach towns for a year. We're just going to come down here and wait it out and see what happens. And there's, every expert's got a point of view about how long it's going to take the bad chemicals to get out of the air, what happens when they start digging up all these houses. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to get dusty again. I mean, I never understood. This is going to sound so dumb. I never understood the term, well, let's wait for the dust to settle and then we'll make a decision.
Then we'll stir the dust back up again.
And now I'm like, I totally understand what they meant. You're just waiting for the dust to settle so you can decide whether it's safe or not. But then there's also the big questions of like, do you rebuild? I did a movie in New Orleans a year after Katrina, and they were still having fights about whether to rebuild neighborhoods, about whether not to, about whether to leave. They knew they were living below sea level. They had levees there that were holding the water back, and do you build it? Do you not build it? What do you do? There's all kinds of real estate issues. Does the government buy your land? All that stuff. And it's all that'll happen here. People will think about it and what's going on, but it is a beautiful place. And there are a lot of people got a lot of memories, and, it'll be fascinating. So what I'd say is the self-care is a big deal because we're in Southern California and we talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
I think people are trying to be helpful, but I also think a lot of people are trying to act like they're okay and they're not. And, you see things, even my wife and I, and we, like I said, we got kind of lucky in this. Yesterday, we got home, we were both like, she went to the wrong restaurant where she was supposed to have lunch with somebody. I got the day wrong, went to a restaurant, was the right one, except the lunch isn't until tomorrow.
Wrong day, yeah.
And I went yesterday. So, there's still things that are flying around in our brains that aren't quite catching. And I think ours is pretty relaxed compared to some of the other people where you just lost it all.
So I heard, I don't know how well, I know part of it's true because I actually saw the interactions on the screenshots where the actress Mandy Moore had tried to start a GoFundMe page for just folks, and she got a lot of flack. And I just, that kind of stuff, it's that on social media again, just, and she was, trying to help regular, quote unquote, regular folks in the area. And I heard where Barbara Corcoran, who's one of the ladies that does Shark Tank, she actually owns property in a mobile home down near the Malibu area that was, the whole community was destroyed. And I was just thinking, it's not, we hear the term LA and we attach this bright lights, big city kind of persona to it all, but it's not all of that. It's, and there's nobody's property and memories and home and belongings is any more or any less meaningful to them than the next person. But it just, here are folks who are, regardless of who it is or who are displaced and have passed on or, lost their homes, lost their communities. And we're going to stir crap up on the internet about, well, you're a celebrity. Why do you need a GoFundMe page? And just, but I also saw the other side of that was this gentleman lived in Texas and just decided he was going to load up a truck and with supplies, just go. And he showed up at some grocery store parking lot and just sat there. He wasn't official, he just went and just started handing stuff out. And it was just him the one day, and then the next day there was a dozen people, and then the week later there was people as far as you could see, and then 5 other sites in the area that had done that kind of stuff. So it's both frustrating and heartwarming to me, Chris, because it's like we want that you know, that empathy and that giving nature to be around all day. We don't want fires to happen where it's needed to that degree,
Right.
but you know, but the humanity side always kind of pops up too. So you're trying to you're trying to you're trying to balance the tragedy and the heartwarming stories and maybe the government. I heard stories of they have this coffer of money that they were supposed to be doing something for water supplies for putting these fires out that's been sitting somewhere. I don't know if it's true or not, that they've not used or they've been arguing about how to use, and it's they've done nothing that they could have done 10 years ago or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
I mean, I don't know if there's a question in there, Jay, but what I would say is that you're right. It brings out the best and the worst in everybody, and I think it's the one big thing about it being the Palisades is it is considered a wealthy area. It is considered, it's not Beverly Hills or whatever, but it's and so people are like, well, probably what they don't need is money. They probably now they're going to do this and that, and then there's all kinds of, I'm sure, cons and games and things being played on people, as well as just, I was talking about earlier, we just had looters show up in our neighborhood, just like, let's see what we can steal out of all these empty houses because no one's coming back because it's still smoky and maybe there's some bad chemicals in the air, so let's get what we can get. And it is, unfortunately, humans are that way, and that's probably part of what you guys talk about in a podcast about mental health and storytelling, because you're trying to highlight the good and the bad, but there's all kinds of movies and television shows made about serial killers, right?
yeah,
The show Cathy loves is Murder in the Building, and it's got murder right in the title,
yeah,
right? Like, so it's not. But what's hard is what you start to see, and I have no foot to stand on in this, but people make a lot of judgments about other people, and that's the hard part. Like, there's a young family in our neighborhood, and their kids, they have a nice little bit of land that's not really buildable. It's at the bottom of the canyon, and they had some goats down there, and after as you may have seen, there was some mudslides and a lot of rain a couple days after the fire, and the family had left, and they for whatever reason, the goats were out there, and after the mudslides, they were gone. And it was amazing how quick people were, well, they were idiots, and the goats were just like props, and they don't really know, they're not farmers, and they killed their goats, but they put out a WhatsApp thing if anybody's seen our goats, and and I just felt like, what, they missing their goats, and they had no idea torrent of water was going to shoot down the canyon and take away their goats, like, and some of us who maybe been in a little bit more of a rural environment or around farmers would say probably you could figure out that the goats were in some jeopardy. And then when you think about humans dying or people losing their houses, do goats matter? But my point is, I don't know that it's a place that any of us need to spend time judging what's hurting or affecting or sad for anybody else, right? And they should be allowed to talk about it. And if somebody found one of the goats, or God forbid, one of the houses down the hill a little bit had a goat, then they would know where the goat was, where it needed to go, right? So you're right that, I don't know Mandy Moore at all, but I'm sure she meant well. I don't believe she was trying to take anybody's money or trying to act special or do whatever. She was just using her fame. And that's the difference of a place like the Palisades or even Los Angeles, is you have really famous people who can reach 30 million people on the internet.
yeah,
Right. I mean, you probably saw those concerts they did, they raised $100 million.
yeah,
And now I'm sure there'll be fights about who gets the money, and, that's the part that's hard, but money does matter, and it does. The city doesn't have any, the state doesn't have any. I don't know that the federal government has a lot to help the Palisades and Altadena rebuild. Some of that's going to be individual people deciding they want to rebuild it. And, that's going to take some effort. And So it is sad, but you also see the great stories. One of my neighbors, I think, deserves at least 50 to not 70% of the credit for our little canyon not catching fire. He had lost his home in a fire previously called the Woolsey Fire. It was about a year and a half ago, 18 months ago. So he had done some training with the fire department. And you can be sort of, I think they call it a civilian firefighter or something, where you do the training, and in an emergency, you actually are allowed to stay there and fight the fire because you know when to get out, when not to be an idiot and get killed and whatever. And this guy, Greg, was awesome. And he lived, luckily for my wife and I, lived across the street from us. And he started just trying to protect his own house, but he stayed there every single night in his car, and any kind of report of a little thing on fire, because that's how it starts. An ember lands on a leaf, catches it on fire, and then the wind hits it and it finds something else to burn. And he was out there putting out spot fires all by himself for like 4 days because the police wouldn't let the rest of us go in to the neighborhood. But he was allowed to be in there. And then a few other guys went in, and they deserve a lot of credit too. And the firefighters agree that they can't cover every house. They can't cover, and they had real bonfires going on in those neighborhoods you saw. So there is some personal, you want to save your thing or your neighborhood. But I know Greg being out there was super helpful for our neighborhood. And, we'll do something for him and thank him. And his house did not burn down either. So, it worked. But I hear what you're saying, and it's sad because you guys in the shore are going to see the news that makes it all the way to the shore.
Yeah.
And that's going to be probably the most sensational stuff, good and bad, and it's probably a little less than both. It's probably a little less bad and a little less good than you'll see, but people are definitely rising to the occasion, even though I think there's a lot of self-help and mental stuff going on for some people that they're not admitting yet about themselves.
They're still in it. You're still right in it.
Exactly.
And like Cathy said earlier, it's now that the fires are they're gone. We don't hear anything, but now it's like the tough part. Really, not that the fire itself wasn't the tough part, but now there's another tough part from here on. That's and I'm maybe 60 Minutes or whomever will have stories about programs that popped up because of the events that may not have popped up otherwise. And I saw this thing, Chris, that it was interesting. There's a town over in Japan, and it's where they have a lot of like very ancient, historic, almost like bamboo structures that are highly, highly, highly susceptible to fire. And they built this system. Now, granted, it's like a village. It's a tiny thing, but this system is like a sprinkler system for the inside of your house, but it's commercial size for the outside. They were testing it. They showed these people testing it, and it's literally these turrets pop up throughout the town when they think that something can happen, and it's a giant sprinkler system for the exterior of the town.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's so funny how these buildings are thousands of years old, but this system pops up that's like space age. It's going to save it.
Well, that's the thing that you realize is that it's all about emphasis, right?
Yeah.
There's enough resources, enough people, enough dollars, enough, know-how to probably solve a lot of these problems. The thing is that you can't solve all of them. So you don't know where to focus your effort. You don't know what to do. I'm sure Cathy goes through that in her job. I'm sure you go through, I know I do. And when something like this hits a neighborhood, like the Palisades, like there was some negativity. There's a big real estate developer who also ran for ran for mayor last election named Rick Caruso. And he's successful. I mean, he's got a lot of, he's got money. He's got a bunch of developments around here in Arizona and other places. And he has a small little development in the Palisades. And it might even gotten to you guys where that one sort of, it's like a mini mall like thing in this area. It's maybe 3 streets and they're sort of coordinated. It's nice. And, but it didn't burn. And people are like, well, what did he do? What did he do to make his thing not burn down? And everybody else, and people are like, oh, he probably had this, or he paid off the fire department, or he did whatever. And he did admit that he had it sprayed with fire retardant because, he knew to do that and he could afford to do that. But he'd done that before the big wind, and it was already there as part of his thing. And people are getting on him, but both his kids live in the Palisades with his grandkids, and both of their houses burnt to the ground. So it wasn't like his money or his situation would have saved him. And that's the thing I think people start to wonder, are there different rules in different places? And our country gets very fired up about people getting different rules. And I think when a place like the Palisades or even LA has an urban fire, not like a wildfire out in the middle of, that little town 2 or 3 years ago called Paradise that got burnt to the ground up in Northern California. People are like, oh, that's too bad, but they lived out in the mountains and they should have known, right? But we're supposedly in a town that has all this stuff, and we got burnt to the ground, and I think that's eye-opening to people. And I think it's things like that town in Japan where you're like, do we have to have this? Right? And that kind of stuff. And so that's why there'll probably be more debate than necessary before the place gets rebuilt, because there'll be a lot of questions about how do you rebuild it.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
I feel like I've gone in and out of like 3 computers, and to not talk just makes me nuts. And I could hear you, but
you're going to have to do self-care just for not being able to talk to anybody.
I'm like, Jay, did you mute me on purpose? Like, what happened? Usually we don't have these problems. But anyway, I'll just say a couple of things. One is, we're not going to be absent from disaster. We've learned it from, Mother Nature. She's got a bad side, we've seen fires and floods and hurricanes, and on top of just people and their conspiracy theories and whatever else. But, we're not going to escape. And how are we going to protect everybody? Think about even like, on the East Coast, some of these islands, we're not going to be able to protect everything from, the sea level rising or the fires that you guys have. And is there some magic to surviving that? I don't know. But, we have the choice, I guess, to live where we want to live and to be in the communities we want to be in. But
what's funny, you were talking about Asheville, North Carolina earlier, about how they had these floods. And, I have a good friend who lives there, and she and I happen to be speaking today. She had just been reaching out like you did, Cathy, to find out if I was all right. And I hadn't really gotten back to her. And I called her and I said, hey, we're okay. Her house was all right. It was higher up on a hill, but she didn't have water for like 4 months. And she had some of her neighbors living in her house. And I said, are you going to stay in Asheville? She's like, yeah, definitely. They said that, this is one of those perfect storm things where it's never happened before. So that makes it even harder. How are you going to prepare? I think that's what causes a lot of stress to talk about the mental health side is, on one hand, you can feel better when somebody says, hey, you couldn't have been prepared for this. It never has happened before, right? Then in our case, there's been towns in Southern California and even in the LA County area burnt to the ground before. It's not like we've never had fires before. But this particular area in this particular modern style of construction has never happened before. So then you think, well, in one way that makes you feel better because how could I be prepared? It's never happened before, right? On the flip side, there's lots of places that have less fire problems than we do, right? So, if you're out on the shore, you could say, Chris, you had to know some shit was going to get burnt down. Like that's what happens out there. Excuse my language to the.
Yeah, but emergency preparedness is tough. Not that this is anything compared to fires and floods, but we've been dealing with more snow around here than usual. Not that that's a tragedy.
No, but it's a similar thing.
I run a business, and it's the whole let's get prepared for this that might come. And then this last time, we're supposed to get 2 feet of snow, and that's not what we usually get around here. So I made a humongous plan, and we get nothing, right? And then there's people that are frustrated because I made this plan and I shifted all these things, but it's like, what do? You either don't plan and then you get socked and then you're struggling, or you do plan. So it's just hard. It's hard. Emergency preparedness is not an easy thing. You can do the drills, you can try to forecast, but at the end of the day, we don't have a lot of control sometimes, I do want to say something though about, you were talking about relationships, and a lot of people struggling, and that makes sense, especially when there is loss. You see that a lot, relationships get really strained, and I'm glad to hear that you and Jono are doing what you can to keep yourselves on track and self-regulated, with the people you talk to. I think that's amazing, and not everybody is good at that. But there's a thing that I've been really on lately called a theory. I'm usually not a theory person. In my whole life of psych background, I've never been a theory person for whatever reason. But I love this theory, and it's called post-traumatic growth theory, and you should check it out because there is such good stuff written about post-traumatic growth. And I've gotten some training with first responders and military veterans, because they go through a lot. They see a lot of tragedy and go through a lot, and often get PTSD. I'm sure there's people, you have a collective grief going on out there. I'm sure there's people that do have a post-traumatic response from what they had. But this post-traumatic growth theory is about, how do I move from being a victim to a warrior from what has happened to me? What has happened to you, and how do you just kind of fight it and go that warrior path? And, it's hard. It's a struggle. There's a book that I have called Struggle Well, and it's about post-traumatic growth. Yeah. And somehow we got to put ourselves in that mindset, right, and push through it. But it's not easy for everybody, for sure.
Well, that's the thing is, and I say this knowing that I live in the Palisades, so if there's other folks from the Palisades who hear this, I'm not talking about you personally. But one of the things that, a community like the Palisades can breed or attract in the kind of people that come to it is, I'm special. I'm here, I'm special. I'm in LA, I'm famous. I'm in LA, I'm rich. I'm from a small town somewhere. And, I think that's one of the things for Jenna and I, neither of us are sort of feeling we don't ever feel that special. We feel lucky, we feel grateful, but I think that's something that I hope a lot of therapists and people who talk to people in this situation at least mention, because it can really crack your sort of self-esteem if you've built up this I'm so special.
That's your identity.
One of these things that happens to you, right? And you're like, wait, maybe I'm not that special. Like, the thing for us was we don't think the fires happened in our town because of us personally. We don't think it was personal. And we don't think our house didn't burn down because we're us, right? Like we just happened to be in that house in that neighborhood that the wind didn't hit, right? Mother Nature's on fire right now, literally, but I don't believe she has a list like Santa Claus saying who's been naughty and who's been nice. And like, I'm going to burn this guy's house down, but I'm not going to burn their house.
You just got lucky.
And you get lucky, whatever. And I think that that's one of the other things you find a little bit more in upscale neighborhoods, a little bit more in neighborhoods where there's famous people and that kind of stuff, where they reach a place where we're one of the lucky ones. We won, we're up here, we're safe, we're whatever. Asheville's a little bit like that. It's not quite, but there's a lot of people live in Asheville, moved there, they came there. It was a place, this is the perfect place. We chose to live here, and then if you want to believe in a higher power, God just flooded it. Now that's not because you personally live in Asheville. That was probably some weather thing and some whatever else that had nothing to do with it. But I do think if there's anything I could say is if you can find a way to really admit to yourself, none of this shit, the good or the bad, is 100% personal. You worked hard. You probably got a little bit of luck. You probably were in the right place at the right time once or twice, and you're probably really good at whatever it is you do, but you still can have your house burned down.
Do you think the helpers are easy to find out there? I mean, I know that there's some looters. You don't want to find the looters, but are the helpers easy to find?
Well, I mean, it depends on I don't know your definition of helper. I mean, there's a lot of bodies. There's a lot of mental health professionals. It's certainly probably the center of all of America for crazy gurus and different theories. And, hold this crystal in your left hand for an hour while you stand on one foot and you're going to be fine kind of stuff, which, again, if that's what you believe in, I'm totally cool with you. It's not what works for me. But I think that there's also hey man, everything's cool. Like, let's go surfing and relax. And like, I hope that some of the folks, whereas I'd say in New England, it's more, no, we're salt of the earth. We don't need any therapy. We don't need to talk about it. There's no post-traumatic. We had a fire, whatever. Here it would be more like, hey, I zen through it. I'm okay. I talked to my next door neighbor for 20 minutes and I'm fine.
Interesting.
And so I think both sides, you get the, I don't want to deal with this.
Right.
And what I keep telling my friends, the ones whose house burned down, the ones whose house didn't burn down, some of my friends, their house didn't burn down, but their kid's school burned down. And that creates just as much trauma for the family. Of what do you do with the kid? How do you keep the kid? And the kid's freaked out. And I keep saying, guys, this is a real thing.
It is.
This is probably not an analogy that you get often on the Eastern Shore Talk, but I happen to be a South Park fan, which is an animated, television show. And my son likes, and occasionally if the two of us are just eating, we'll eat in front of the TV. And the other day we turned on an episode. I don't think there's any episodes one of us hasn't seen at this point, but we turned on this episode. It happened to be about school shootings.
Oh, wow.
And I know there was a active shooter at UVA today because a friend of mine's son is there. And it's like, but the whole point of the episode was that this one mom is just going crazy and trying to get the other parents to realize we shouldn't just be accepting school shootings. Like, we shouldn't just be, hey, that's every day. Some guy shows up with a gun. Kids shouldn't be afraid that they're going to get killed at school.
Right.
Like that. I agree with that. And I like the fact that they had an episode about that. I don't think a lot of parents are watching South Park, so I don't know who they were talking to, but it was a good episode. But my point is, these kind of natural disasters and these other things, it's similar in that we start to just get used to it. It's like you said, you haven't heard about what's been happening in the Palisades or, Altadena or whatever in a week because nothing's on fire.
Right.
They're just looking for the next place on fire. And we all sort of like, okay, fire's over, everything's fine. Like, I remember one of the hardest things was watching work come back. Like the first week, no one called anyone. There was nothing, right? Because you got whole people in my industry don't live anywhere near the Palisades or Altadena, right? So their life is completely normal except for what they see on the news, like you guys, right? So they're thinking, can I call this guy? Maybe he lives in the Palisades. I shouldn't call him. Right. Then in the second week, you get a lot of reach out. Hey, man, I hope your house didn't burn down. That's already a weird thing to put at the beginning of an email. I hope your house didn't burn down. Like, what are you going to write back? No, it didn't burn down. So now I want to talk about some movie I want to make, like what happened. And so that by now we're 4 or 5 weeks out, everybody's just, well, it is what it is, whatever. People are going back to work, school, playing sports, blah, blah, blah.
But the fact that you said there's a dump truck in the road, there's dump trucks in the road.
Day.
I'm like,
every day.
What? That's not what I'm envisioning in my head.
But how normal is it, Chris? Because, I mean, it looks like it just wasn't just people's homes. It's like whole communities, stores and churches and schools and like,
yeah, but they're small. I mean, LA County's 9 million people, right? Yeah. You're probably talking about 300,000 or 400,000 people are affected. Now that's a shitload. That'd probably be the whole Eastern Shore of Maryland. I don't know, right? 300,000 people. But the other 8,700,000 people, their life is just going on, and it's just a hassle.
That's just weird, right?
They're stuck in traffic. They're, they used to like to go to the farmer's market in the Palisades. That ain't going to happen for a while. They like their kids can't go to school because they drove in, I mean, Santa Monica is the town right next to it.
Yeah.
And my house is right on the border between the two towns. Everyone in Santa Monica, it's not like there's a few houses that burn down. Nothing burned down in Santa Monica, right? So they're having regular life. But if they had anything like a school or a church or some part of their community in the Palisades, they can't go there. So they're at home trying to figure out, where am I going to have church? What am I going to do? And so there's a lot of this where it hits you, but it's you're not as bad as the person who has no house. Like one of my son plays on a volleyball team, and we were at a game the other day, and I see I'm even smiling about telling the story, but it's sad. He sitting next to me is one of the fathers whose house burned all the way down to the ground, and we've been sitting next to each other at high school volleyball games for 4 years, right? And I say, so what are you guys doing after the game? And he goes, well, I mean, it's hard to know because, my house burned down. And he's sort of like, he doesn't know how to bring it up, but it affects every single decision.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what to do. We know his house burned down. I wasn't trying to bring up the house burning down by saying, what are you doing after? Because what we were talking about.
You're just trying to have normal conversation.
Yeah,
we're trying. Yeah. He's joking about it, but then he says, what I do now is anytime I do something, even if it's something I would have done before the fire, and somebody's starting to get mad at me, I'll just say, hey, my house burned down. So for him now, it's like it's his excuse for any bad.
Probably use that for a while, right?
Right. And so I don't know how to answer you, Jay. Like everybody's dealing with it differently. Some people are fully overwhelmed, like just shutting down, overwhelmed. Like their shit is gone. They don't know what to do with their kids. They don't know. I know a number of families who the parents have flown out from wherever they lived and are trying to help out just because getting up and making lunch and driving a kid to the new school that is now an hour and a half away, right, is a pain in the ass, and it changes your whole life if you have 3 hours in the car in LA traffic every day, right?
Wow.
That's different than you decide to live and go to school where you could walk to school, and that's not something anyone's going to talk about on the news. No one's going to do a report about, man, it is hard when you have to commute an hour and a half, because there are people probably commute an hour and a half every day anyway, and their shit didn't burn down.
So all this affects their self-care, taking care of.
But that's the thing is I just think it's
either you don't have time to take care of yourself. Maybe church was something that was supportive and they don't have that, or their gym or whatever. So people are scrambling. I didn't even really think about the levels of everybody is at such different levels. And wow.
And look, you may have read, I doubt it made it all the way out there or any of you should care, but there's been a big local insurance problem. A lot of insurance companies been dropping houses for fires. And so there's a lot of people who actually weren't insured.
Wow.
They were in between, California, the state created this thing called the Cal Fire Fund, and it's only 2/3 your house, whereas your insurance would be your whole house, right? They also started running out of money. So a lot of families, when they were getting canceled, they were waiting to see what new options are going to come, right? And if you had a mortgage payment, the banks are giving people a little bit of a window to not have to have insurance, because that's a big reason you got to have insurance, because you got a mortgage and the bank's like, I loaned you this money to have a house on that lot. If there's no house, you don't have the money to pay your mortgage back, right? So there's a lot of these weird things like that. But then you wake up one day and say, all I was doing was waiting to get a fair insurance policy. My shit burnt to the ground. And what a lot of people are worried about is the next wave is going to be banks calling up and saying, hey, your house burnt to the ground. You don't have insurance. We're taking your house.
Oh, wow.
And there's going to be a whole lot of nightmare about that, right? And then there's going to sue all these insurance companies, and the state's going to have, it's just, but that realization, if you wake up and you realize, shit, all I did was wait and it just happened to happen right now, right?
Yeah.
Is going to affect people. And there's people in different spots all over, house burned down, but had insurance. House burned down, didn't have insurance, didn't have enough insurance. Now you're getting divorced. Like, how do you divide up the house that burnt to the ground? right? Like, part of why you're getting divorced is because one of you wants to rebuild and one of you doesn't. What do? Right? Like, because the house, how do you value a lot that has a burnt down house on it? Like there's all this dumb shit that comes up that it just makes you just feel overwhelmed. Where's your kid? I saw a guy the other day. I happened to run into a friend of mine at the coffee shop. He was almost in tears. I was like, Mike, what's going on, dude? I'll help you. What do you need? What? I'm not doing anything important. What's going on? He's like, I forgot to take my son to school today.
Mm.
He's sitting in the car right there. I forgot where we were going. And he was so afraid. The kid, it's a little kid. He said he didn't know what he thought. Maybe he wasn't going to school. So he didn't say anything. And I'm just sitting here and I'm like, what else did I forget? What else is going on? I'm like, well, let's take your kid to school. And then if you want, I'll buy you a cup of coffee and we can talk it out. But he figured it out. But it's like those kind of
moments, like
me
friend.
Forgetting where I had lunch yesterday. Like that. That's luckily I didn't let anybody down. I just drove and went to a restaurant by myself. But there wasn't, it's not that he was just like, I just totally forgot what I was doing. And that's because you get overwhelmed. And I'm sure that's part of the PTSD thing.
Yeah,
you do with
stress
military and EMT guys who see shit and they just can't unsee it. And then you ask them to go back to their regular life. And it's just sitting there.
Well, you know what they say, fight, flight, or freeze, right? You're either ready to fight it or run from it or you freeze.
Yeah.
You froze.
I definitely know some people who are in that sort of, they're like zombies. They're walking around sort of frozen. They're not sure. And so that's why I'd say the thing, I think something like this, a fire, a hurricane, blizzard or something totally unexpected, right? Could be military, could be you. I don't know that we 100% know. You probably do. You've studied more how long it takes. There's different religions have different amounts of time for grieving. I think grieving does take a little longer than maybe the straight Christian churches deal with it. But like I like the Jewish tradition of sitting Shiva, where you got like a month or so, and then I think it's like a month later, and then a year later you grieve again. It's like, because loss is a big deal, and even though maybe a human didn't die, they might have lost their pets. Like, I mean, nobody's even talking about how many pets got killed, because when you only had 15 minutes to leave, if you just couldn't find your cat, if you couldn't get the guinea pig out of the cage, if you couldn't, God forbid, even your dog just didn't get in the car.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I can stay here and burn, or I can leave the dog, right? Like, it's scary. And I honestly don't know. It's still early enough, even though it's almost 50 some days now, that people are still trying to figure out how they're reacting, and I just, like my buddy at the coffee shop, I just am trying to be helpful because mine aren't quite that bad. I can't really invite anybody to stay at our house because of the water, as I said earlier. But other than that, we've been as helpful as we can. I have driven some people around. I've helped some older folks move back in. We've had a lot of meetings about services and, and like I said, my friend Greg, my neighbor, I mean, this guy stayed up all night for those first 3 nights, putting out spot fires. Like that's pretty cool. And I think I personally benefited from that. So,
well, I think you're doing the right thing by saying, "Are you okay? How can I help you? Can I drive you somewhere? Can I get you something to drink?" I mean, that's exactly what people need. You're doing exactly what you need to do.
Well, I didn't come here to hear that, but it's nice to hear that.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's a start. That's what you need. And I don't think there's a time frame for this, man. It's like this stuff's going to stick with people for a long time. And our friend Janice Ridgway, who said to tell you hi, right? I already texted you that. Janice Ware is her name now. She's doing this practice called grief recovery method. I always want to call it motto, grief recovery method. There's a book for that as well, but it really is like her practice, for example, is a series of sessions. I believe it's 7, and people talk about their losses. And like you said, it can be, it's not always death. It's a job, a community, a pet. It's our youth, whatever. but it's stuff you got to deal with. And grief is not just like, okay, I'm going to get over this in the 65th day, and it's just not like that. And life's so demanding, everybody wants everybody to get back to normal like yesterday, and nobody wants to be convenienced in their life. But people are inconvenient. You're inconvenienced.
Yeah. Oh, I could.
Even though you're lucky,
your podcast that live in your county who could tell you how inconvenient I am. But it's why I think things like this, and I know people probably think I'm pandering. I'm not getting paid anything. I grew up with you guys, but I actually think it's a fascinating thing you talk about on this podcast. I think the mental health movie stuff, we haven't talked a lot about movies, but it's weird. Like Jay was asking me earlier, the thing that weirdly happens right now in LA is all these award shows. And so people you want to talk about a crazy juxtaposition of your house just burned down, but what you're worried about is, I talked to a guy who owns a lot of big laundries around here. And he said, like, the first calls he got, right, because he lost some of his laundromats and he lost some of his cleaning stuff. He said the first calls he got was for people wondering if their Oscar outfit burnt down or not. He's like, that is the weirdest thing to worry about, although it makes total sense that you're hoping you still get to go to the Oscars, right? And then there's all debates about, are we having the Oscars? And they decided to have all the shows because they wanted to act like stuff was still happening, right? But everybody's talked about the fires and everybody's talked about tragedy and whatnot. And it's like, life does go on, and you do somewhat have to engage in it, but you also don't have to pretend nothing happened.
Yeah.
And there'll be some people who won't go to the Oscars who would have because they just can't take it. Right. And there'll be, I'm sure someone will make a speech that somebody thinks was inappropriate because of what happened. But if you live in Ukraine right now, your shit's been getting blown up for 3 years, right? Years. If you happen to be in Israel or Gaza, you've been in a war for a while. Like if you
whole life.
like people are going through shit all over the world all the time.
Right.
And, I think that's a balance too, is with the social media and the technology now, about that stuff, and it's tough.
So Chris, you got a few minutes to talk movies?
Sure. Always.
The best diversion ever, right?
Yeah. So let's switch gears. We wanted to catch up with you and, just kind of get a unique perspective of what's going on.
Well, we appreciate everything that you've shared. It's really eye-opening.
Well, you guys are the best, and I love being on the show. So
I've been thinking a lot lately. A couple things, and I put a post out on social media a couple weeks ago about, and you're on this kind of crusade to kind of reconnect with the audience, and you're kind of doing what I would call some informal research about how do you as movie makers kind of reconnect with what audiences want these days. So I kind of got thinking about, like, what are the criteria that audiences, whomever, uses when they choose the movies that they choose. And I've got 4 basic ones, and I'm sure there's others.
Because you're an expert.
Well, I'm a frequenter. Let's just say that.
So is the first one, it's available in Easton on Friday night? Is that the first criteria?
That's the convenience of it, for sure. So kind of four for me, and I'm sure there are others, is story, number 1. And this is, I'll give you my order: story, genre, cast, and then a category that I call like previews, suggestions, and trailers. Which of those 4 and in what order? And there are others. I'm sure people use other criteria as well. But I was just wondering, Chris, as a consumer, just like a, not the filmmaker side of you, but just the movie fan, what draws you? What's your list? It doesn't have to be the ones I mentioned, but like what draws you to a movie?
Can I ask one quick question? And this will maybe make me sound like the geek that I am about this exact issue. Is where in the decision-making process of what I'm going to watch are we, in the sense of, for me, I think it starts at do I have time to watch what? Right? So if what you're saying is, I've already decided I have time to watch a movie.
Yes.
Right? So then I have, what are the 4 criteria of what am I going to watch? There's also another one, which is, where do I feel like watching it? Right? Do I want to go to a theater? Am I watching at home? Whatever. I think, so what I'd say is, if you get past those 2, right, without having landed on what you're going to watch, because a lot of times what you're going to watch is determined by those 2.
Yes.
Like my son and I having dinner together, we're not watching a movie, so an episode of South Park, like I talked about earlier, works, even an episode we've already seen, because we're just there to laugh and have fun and basically give us eye candy while we're eating, right? I would say that if you're really sitting down, you want to watch something new, you want to see something cool, you decided you're going to watch a movie, I would say your 4 are pretty good. I would say that there's a lot of people who actually look at rating. You may not look at rating, but a lot of people are like R-rated, or is it going to be too gross, or is it going to be too, like there's a movie out there now people like that. I mean, some people in the business talk about, called Nosferatu, about this famous devil story. Like that could fit into your genre thing. If you did it like R-rated horror is different than Goonies, right? Where I might want to watch, the what's the vampire movie in the town where it's the kids and the whatever.
Lost Boys.
Yeah. So the Lost Boys is different than Nosferatu, right? And that kind of stuff. So to me, I think there's a little bit of rating, but I would say if you could add a 5th one, because I agree with all 5 of what you said. Although I'd say the 4th one, which is marketing, trailers, reviews, curation, friends, all that's in one category of sort of recommendations or who you trust. But I would say all of that only comes if you've sort of landed on the first 3. Because if you don't feel like watching Top Gun, somebody telling you they love Top Gun isn't going to make you watch it, right? But if you're thinking between, I kind of feel like a thriller, I kind of feel like this, and then you remember your friend was like, I love, this, you might do it. I think the other thing is, for certain people, there's who the filmmaker is. I think there's still a few people, whether it's Spielberg, it could be Greta Gerwig after Barbie, it could be Chris Nolan. A lot of people like, so they're and the sort of scope of it, right? Like I feel like a big epic thing, right? And I don't know, all of that could be in genre, but I do think a person thinks about it. And the only other one is the mood you're in. Now, you may figure it out by those 3 that you sort of had, which is, the plot, or, the story, because story will decide whether it's comedy or romance or a, whatever. I would say genres can be hard nowadays, because something like Murder in the Building, which Cathy has admitted she likes a lot and just ended, it's kind of funny, right? There's also a mystery. So but I'd say for me, I usually start at sort of the mood I'm in and who I'm with. That's the other one, maybe. Are you watching alone? Are you watching with other people? What's the thing? In my very specific situation, the other one that comes up is I sometimes get asked what I would go see by a group of people because I'm theoretically in the business. Or now you probably get it because everybody knows you watch a lot of movies. But it's that thing of, I sometimes have to say, well, I got to look at who the other people are because they may not like what I like.
Yeah.
Right? Like you probably know Cathy well enough that if she said, hey, Jay, I'm going to come with you Friday night, whatever movie you're going to see, you might think, we're not going to go see this movie, Cathy, because you're not going to like it.
Well, right? That's not why. He just wouldn't let me.
Well, that's a personal thing between you guys. You got to work out on your own.
Because he thinks I talk. He doesn't know that I talk in the movie because he's not letting me. But he does.
Yeah, talking in the movie is bad, Cathy. You got to stop.
I'm not. That's an assumption. He made up that story. But he will.
She was talking to me from 4 rows in front of me.
Shush. But he will say to me, hey, he picks up what I'm starting to like, because he will say, look, just so you know, blah, blah. Well, you told me, Captain America is going to be, he knows I'm a Marvel fan. And he's like, Captain America. And I did. I went to see Captain America. And then I saw Paddington. Me and Marty went and saw Paddington on Valentine's Day. I don't know what that says about us, but that's what happened.
I can tell you what it says. It says that you're romantics. It says that you actually like the movie theater. It says that you want to be together for 2 hours, and it says that you want to be out of your house.
Yeah.
So those are all things. I'm sad.
Nostalgia.
Again, speaking for my industry, I'm sad that all the romantic comedies were on Netflix instead of in the movie theater. So on Valentine's Day, you couldn't go, see something a little less kid oriented. But
well, because I was saving Captain America for Saturday night because I took 9 people to the theater. How about that?
And how did it play?
9 people. I did my part.
And did people like it?
Oh, yes, we all liked it. But I'm a franchise fan. I'm probably different than Jay. I'm going to be lured by the shiny object. If it's I go for an actor I like. I'm going to go for a sequel.
He had cast in his, and he had
cast is down the list though. And I liked Captain America.
It's up there.
I just learned that, and partly from talking with Chris, is that it's like how movies are presented is different. So that era of the Infinity War, Endgame, that whole Avengers colossal, we've got 6 different stories that meld into one and make this gigantic thing is not, number one, it's never happened before, and it's not going to happen again. And I think our expectations have to put that back there where it was, not. So I no, this Captain America is nowhere near any of that era Marvel stuff, and it's not, and I can't expect it to be. But I did enjoy it, so I was certainly not disappointed. It didn't knock my socks off, but I didn't expect it to. I would be surprised if any movie like this blows me away. I'll have movies that are pleasant surprises, but I don't. We'll get into that a little bit here in a minute, Chris. That whole. And
I went for the trailers. Like I left there knowing I want to see Karate Kid Legends.
No. Now I will say this, and I think I even emailed you, Chris, about the newest Superman teaser trailer.
The trailer.
It's a good trailer.
I think it's one of the best trailers I've ever seen, and I'm not a trailer person. Trailers last on my list.
I'm a trailer person.
I've rewatched that trailer 20 times.
Yeah, it's a great trailer.
Something about how James Gunn, you could tell every single detail. The music in the trailer is fantastic. They took that old John Williams original, and then they made it a rock, more modern rock. Have you seen the trailer?
Oh yeah, after you emailed me.
We all did, Jay.
Now look, I'm less of a DC fan than I am Marvel. So I'm taking it with a grain of salt, but how it got my attention, and there was a scene that scene where he swoops in slow motion and shields a little girl when the debris is coming behind him, and the music climaxes at that very exact moment. Like I got goosebumps, and like that 10 seconds made me feel in a trailer. Yeah. So he got me in that 10 seconds right there. I mean, I even texted Cathy and said, Cathy, you got to watch this trailer.
Well, what I'm sad about is if you could let James Gunn just make good movies, but he's been empowered and hired to figure out, as you said about Endgame and, the Avengers, this 7-story thing that's got to fit together. Like, it's too bad because when he's left alone to just make them, I mean, I think his Guardians of the Galaxy, isn't he the guy that did that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the most adventurous, funny, sweet action. That first one, it's like the songs I think about, the characters. He did a great job with that. And
we loved a tree. We loved a tree.
Yeah. Groot. I am Groot. But I think the point you're making is that we all have our list, and as Cathy's saying, mine might be in a different order. But I think you're right that a lot of it is that I think you probably represent sort of, you're a little further from the business than I am, but we together probably represent guys who really think about what we're going to go watch, right? And we're managing our own expectations. Cathy may have either other stuff on her mind. She may be busier. She may care less. But the point is that some of those other things, I think, in your list tend to be more emphasized. I think genre is super early in the decision-making tree for most people because it has to do with their mood and who they're with and what they feel like. And I think cast, and it's sort of part of what I talked about when I came to Oxford to the community center, was that it was very eye-opening to me, as weird as this is going to sound, having worked with two big actors for years and whatever, is that it still is amazing to me how many people make their decisions based on cast.
Well,
I think they make it with the combination of genre, right? So like, Robert Downey Jr. in a certain thing is really, really interesting and compelling. In another thing, he might not be.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's the same, there's a lot of actresses in that same way. But the point is that I think those two, the genre and the cast, have proven to be the default for most people.
Look, we were just in the Outer Banks at a friend's house.
Yeah.
And so there's 4 of us, and one day it was rainy, and we're like, okay, let's watch movies. We'll just watch some movies, right? Because where he lives, you have to drive like 6 miles on the beach to get to his house. So it's not like you can get out really quick, right? So what did we do? We all decided, I've seen that. I don't know about that. You went through that thing that takes up so much time. And these aren't people that we hang out with all the time. So we're trying to figure out each other on what we like. But we decided we wanted to see a comedy. We wanted to laugh. And then we ended up with Will Ferrell. We saw 2 Will Ferrell movies. One was a new one.
With Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah, we saw that. Then he got me to see Eurovision. And I'm like, I don't even know what to say about that movie. I'm like, do I like it? Do I hate it? I'm not sure, but I want to know what happens. I got to watch it now because I want to know what happens. I still don't know what I thought about that movie. My kids are like, oh my God, we love that movie. And I'm like, you did? I wouldn't even have thought y'all would have watched that movie. So yeah. Yeah.
But what's funny about that is this was the other, when I sort of brought up mood, it was also, there is a place, and this is the right podcast to talk about it, of this combination of mental health and storytelling, which is you also go into it. It's sort of probably like eating. If you drink or do drugs, it could be that. It's, if you're in a certain headspace, you want something different, right? And you almost can't define it. Like, so, there's a term that gets used for food all the time. I've started using it for stories. It's like comfort stories.
Oh, yeah.
Like comfort food, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like Will Ferrell, to some level, for you, Cathy, and your friends, was comfort food, even if you hadn't seen the actual movie.
Because we're going to laugh. We knew.
Because what Will Ferrell means. Like, I bet what you didn't watch was Stranger Than Fiction, where he's not funny. And I think he's great in that. And it's a different kind of movie. But the point is, you watch one of those, right? We do that. Last night, I was telling you a couple nights ago, Ike and I were together and we watched the South Park episode. Yeah. Last night, he came home and Jenna had already fallen asleep. And we love Lord of the Rings. We just love it, me and Ike.
No.
And so Ike has had it on in the background. He does whatever, but it's like comfort food for us. And so we were having dinner and he turned on Return of the King, and we watched these scenes, which we could basically recite, right? We know exactly what's going on, but we have fun. And again, we knew we weren't going to finish it because we had the extended version would be 4.5 hours of our life. And we knew that everything that was going to happen, but somehow that fit what was going on in our heads right then in a house that didn't burn down, but he still can't take a shower. And I don't know, I'm not psychologically skilled enough to identify why one day it was South Park, one day it was Lord of the Rings. And most of the time he wants to watch anime, which I have a lot of trouble locking into. I like some of them, but they're just not, I don't know. I don't quite get them. And I'm sure it's an age thing or whatever. But the point is, there are these psychological things that I think that's why I asked you when in the thought process, like, for my wife and I, our sort of go to sleep routine is we put on some show. She'll fall asleep halfway through the first. I'll finish that episode and probably watch another episode before I fall asleep.
Well, let me ask you this. Maybe I'm saying too much about our household. There's way too many TVs in it, but this is probably bad, but I'm just going to say it. There's never a time where there's not TV on in our house. Like everybody has.
But is it like Sports Center, or is it like they're watching stuff?
It's sports, or it's those comfort shows, like you said, Modern Family's in the background, or what are the other?
Marty got the Hallmark Channel on in the background.
Kids won't do that.
But
lately it's Modern Family, it's The Office, whatever.
But no matter what it is, Chris, that's the self-care of it. It's whatever mood it's taking us away from the bad.
But you know what? And I might walk by to whatever to get to make something to eat or whatever, and I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna watch that for probably 5 minutes, and I'm gonna laugh at something stupid that just happened on that show, and then I'm gonna leave it. Like I'm gonna leave them there and go on. I don't need to watch the whole thing, but it's probably like what you're saying about.
But do they probably have something else going on too? Like they got their phone out, or they got their laptop, or because that's the thing. If you're talking about what your boys are doing or your boys and their friends, is what I notice is this generation. I'm sure there'll be data and books written about it, but our kids' generation has definitely grown up in a situation where part of their comfort is created by multiple screens.
Yes.
Like they can't, my son Charlie, who went to Pally High, is at Wesleyan University right now. He's in his room, he'll FaceTime, and we'll see behind him, he's got a big screen mostly to play video games on, but usually when he's talking to us, there's he'll have a movie or something on the back. And then he's also got his laptop open doing his homework. I'm like, Charlie, why did you call me if you're doing all these other things? And in Charlie's mind, it's sort of like having the light on and listening to music.
Oh, right? They're experts. I don't know how they do homework and have earphones on or whatever. I'm like,
yeah, I'm just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing we haven't quite figured out is that, and there's a lot of people now, and you guys may have talked about it on the podcast before, talking about dopamine, right? And these dopamine rushes. And I certainly believe watching stuff, does and can give you dopamine, right? 100%. And I think the TikToks and the Instagram and Snap, all the fast things are giving you more dopamine faster. And if you can wait longer and get the big payoffs of the movies and longer things, you get dopamine in a different way. I don't know enough about it. I just have a couple friends who are obsessed with it, talk about it every time we talk. They're like, see, that's dopamine. I'm like, dude, shut up about this dopamine. I don't, but I think that audio visual stimulation has taken on a whole new place in all these kids' lives because they have this device in their hand that can deliver it to them all the time. And at school now, pretty much nobody goes to school without a laptop in front of them. And most of the time they can split the screen and have something going on and something else. And they almost seem to function better when two things are happening or three or whatever.
That's a perfect segue to what we talked about before we popped on recording, Chris, is you came to Oxford and did that talk to the local community here. And it got me thinking about, is there a difference now for why people watch movies versus 30 years ago? And here's my theory, and you're kind of hitting on it. I think, and there's that, and you can tell me, you would know better than I would, but there's that what I've been reading is that kind of that key demographic, that 18 to 34, in a lot of entertainment industry, not just movies, but whatever it is. They're different. Today's 18 to 34 is not the same as when we were in the 18 to 30. It's just not.
Yeah.
And to me, and we've all talked about the effect of streaming, and that certainly here in the past 5 years absolutely has an effect for sure. But I go back to when the smartphone became a real thing, because like you were saying, there's almost like this. The 18 to 34 now has been conditioned to have it, whatever the form of entertainment is, music. They've got the YouTube content creators and the influencers are just, they're everywhere. So you don't have to go to streaming or go to the movies to be entertained for 2 hours. You can watch a content creator on YouTube.
Yeah.
So it's almost like going to any movie in the theaters now for that demographic is like a connecting flight to the next thing in their head. And and they're even like this in the movie theater while they're with the phone in their lap doing whatever. So it's they're whereas before, yes, we had less choices of entertainment when we were 18 to 34 for sure, but there was it was an event because it was less, it was fewer things, and so we were conditioned because it was that. Where now they're not dependent on going to the movies for anything. They can sit at home and watch YouTube, not even stream or whatever, and it's just like whatever it is. So they're on YouTube for an hour. That's a connecting flight to, watching Netflix for an hour, and then they might possibly once every blue moon go to the theaters and actually. And I actually saw, Kristen, now that 60 plus demographic is like, numbers wise, as far as frequency, is almost the same as an 18 to 34 year old.
100%.
Whereas I don't think 30 years ago that was the case, probably.
No, and our generation, and none of us are quite 60 yet, but we're getting there, is we're going to actually, most people think in the theater world, movie theaters, and also I'm sure Broadway plays, that our generation is going to tip the scale to where it's older people more than younger people, because we still have this comfort, this reaction, whatever that thing is, where it's nostalgic, that we were comfortable and happy being in a movie theater.
We were.
Shut everything out. It made it dark. You were watching that thing. Maybe you're with a girl or somebody, you're messing around, but there was no distractions. You were there. And that's part of why I'm sure I ended up here working in this business, because I felt so happy and safe in a movie theater. My kids don't have that. As you said, they almost feel like it's the delayed connecting flight.
Yeah.
Like they're stuck in the theater for 2 hours, waiting for the movie to end, waiting for it to begin. And so it's a weird, that psychological thing of where you feel safe and happy and what makes you safe and happy. And maybe that's the wrong term. I don't know. I'm sure there's some psychological term for when you feel comfortable or whatever, is having two things on, knowing that you're not missing anything, knowing that even though you're missing shit all over the world, because you can't teleport to the thing that's on your phone, and half the stuff that's on your phone's fake anyway. But the point is that they found a different way to calm their nerves and calm their anxiety using audiovisual stuff than we did, right? And so the question is, some of our generation has bought into that. You'll see people even that we know be walking around with phone all the time or looking at stuff or doing whatever. I feel like the phone's an obligation. To me, I feel like I'm carrying around a bunch of people that want something from me. So all I want to do is put the phone down, right? Or that it's a tool to get work done that I'm avoiding because it's 8 o'clock at night and I'm not really supposed to be working.
See, I feel that way about email.
Yeah, exactly. You just don't, you wish that there were hours where the shit was cut off, right? Because it doesn't cause you relief. It causes you stress to be reachable, right?
Yeah.
Whereas our kids have grown up reachable all the fucking time. And that's not how it works for them. I will say, I've noticed some of the kids, and this is what they say about millennials, whatever, but they don't like deadlines. But the phone and the technology isn't something that means there's a deadline. For me, it always means, there's a deadline I should hit, or I got my phone so I can probably call that person back, but I really don't want to. Back in the old days, there was no phone, so if I wasn't in my office, I couldn't call. Right? So he's not mad that I didn't call him back because he knows I'm not near a phone, right? And I don't have to feel the pressure I should call him back because I know he knows I'm not near a phone, right? Well, that's over now. There's no version of anyone who's not mad at me for not calling them back, not being mad at me through this entire night. And then when you add the texting, the email, where they wake up in the morning, they're like, wow, he didn't even write me back last night. You're just like, So a movie theater to me is a safe place where we're like, well, I'm not texting you in the movies. But my point is, I don't know whether one's better or worse. It's just the way we grew up, And I think that's part of what Hollywood's going through as an industry, and what I talk about in some of my public stuff, is this idea of, it's not that one is better than the other. It's one creates a different emotional reaction in a person. And some of it depends on your age and what you did and what you had, knowledge of. I have a buddy in Germany who really hates TV. He just thinks it's bad. And so he set up a projector and he had a screen on his wall, and they would watch movies as a family. So for his kids, who are all my kids' age, movies, getting to watch a movie was like a big deal,
Treat.
Right? As Cathy said, you walk through her house, there's 2 or 3 TVs on the whole time.
Oh, it's people will walk out of the house and nobody's here, but the TV's on. Like it is a living thing.
Exactly. But the point is, that's the same thing about the electricity. It's the same thing about the gas. It's the same, like it's become part of the house, right? I mean, I say to Jen all the time, like we, this past 45 days, we've been staying all these other places. She's always freaked out. She's like, how come the first thing you do is turn something on? I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, you turn on the TV, or you turn on the music, or you turn on the laptop. And I'm like, because I need some fucking noise.
Right.
Just sitting in here all by ourselves in some stranger's house, wondering if our house is going to burn down. Isn't that fun inside this thing, my head right here?
We even sleep with noise. We have fans. We turn fans on.
My TV never goes off. My TV stays on all night long. It only turns off when I go to work. That's it.
My daughter puts on How I Met Your Mother, and she puts it on her laptop in her bed, and she has it, loud enough that you can hear it in the room next door, and falls sound asleep, and it doesn't bother at all. So then you think, you're the parent, I'm at an age where I have to use the restroom a few times in the middle of the night.
Right.
And I get up and I'm walking through the hallway and I'm like, well, who the fuck is that? And I go over and it's her laptop.
Talking.
So I think, okay, she used it to fall asleep. Fair enough. But she's sound asleep. She doesn't need it. Close it.
She wakes up.
Right? Wakes up, turns it right back on and says, Dad, what the hell are you doing? Like, so I don't know. She went to a good college. She's trying to be a doctor. She doesn't seem any emotionally worse off because she needs to have How I Met Your Mother playing while she goes to sleep. I happen to be friends with Allison Hannigan because she was in the American Pie movies. And when I told Allison this story, she's like, Chris, if you want, I could record a bunch of audio stuff and you could just play it for her to give her the messages that you want to give her. And I said, it's never going to work without all of you.
Instead
she loves the whole cast,
We lost our electric one night, like at 5 a.m. So all the fans cut in the house. Everybody woke up. So it's the same kind of thing. Everybody like congregates. What's going on? What's happening? We don't lose electric. What's going on? And I'm like, wow. Turn your phones on. There's a fan app.
Cathy, with Easton Cable, if you leave it on for a certain amount of time and you don't do anything with it, it'll shut itself off.
I know.
And every time it does that, like it stops and it's just writing on the screen. I wake up every night.
Blue screen and you got to press OK.
Yep. Yep. I wake up from the silence. The silence wakes me up.
Are you still there? Yeah. Oh my gosh. We're all so weird. But isn't that the cool thing? We're all so weird.
Well, but I think the other thing, having a kid who has seizures, you had a kid who had seizures, Cathy, the thing you learn about and you guys, I'm sure, may have studied it at different levels than I ever have, but having to learn a little bit more about the brain going through that process. Yeah. I think what we're talking about right now is really just an example of the fact that none of us have any idea actually how the brain is processing all this shit, right? Like, it's like you can't, like I said, wouldn't work for me, although I fall asleep with the TV on too, but then I turn it off, right? My wife has to have me in the room and I'm like, honey, I don't want to go to bed this early. Like, just get in the bed, help me fall asleep, and then you can do whatever you want to do.
That is Marty. Okay. That is Marty. I'm just like, what? That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, you just made that up. And then I can't go to sleep.
Melatonin more.
Then I can't go to sleep, and he starts a slow roll of snoring, which then continues the me not sleep.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Is like that's why I really do, and I know I say it all the time, but I love the idea of this podcast because I think there's so much that has to do with all the things I'm interested in for storytelling, for the audience, for all. I mean, I used to make fun of one of my kids loved that ASMR stuff for on YouTube where you just get the sound or you get the thing.
You got the mic. You can put something right on it and do it right now.
Yeah, exactly. And
your fingernails on it.
But and I was always like, what are you doing? He's like, I don't know. Sometimes, man, I can zone out, like meditation or whatever. And he said, and when you get the picture, it's crazy. And I started watching these like mechanical things, like factory arms moving and like, things.
Squishing crayons and
literally like 20 minutes later, I'm still staring at the thing. I'm like, what the hell happened? And he's like, see, it calms you down. Like you just don't know. And that's why I think, again, back to my little mission over the next few years, sort of trying to figure out how those of us who theoretically make stuff actually understand what it's doing, and maybe there's a lot of these assumptions we've made, like length, right? Moses, if you believe in Moses, didn't come down with the 10 commandments that said a movie's 85 minutes long or longer, right?
We missed that. Maybe that's the 11th one.
That was decided because that was how many shows people could pay for when you had a Nickelodeon theater 85 years ago, right? Nobody has decided that a series has to be 6 episodes or 12 episodes or do whatever. Nobody's decided an episode's got to be whatever. In the case of advertising, they did a lot of research on, we got to go about 7-8 minutes and then we can show some ads. But if we show ads all the time, people get pissed. But the point is, like, there's all these things that maybe this understanding helps. Like your point about getting, you got goosebumps on the Superman trailer. A trailer's 2.5 minutes long. If somebody can actually give you goosebumps in 2.5 minutes, that's pretty good.
And he's watched it 50 times. That's a lot of goosebumps.
And, but I sure have seen the scene I saw last night in Lord of the Rings at least 20 times, and it still makes me happy, right? And then in my head, it's even better because I know he's going to become the king.
Yep, and say you bow to no one, and he bows to them.
Yeah,
that's a classic. Yep,
exactly.
Yep,
and but that's why I think it's there's something about it that now that we've all lived with screens for so long, because that's the thing. I mean, our generation. You may remember, I guarantee you somebody in your life had a black and white TV.
We had a black and white TV.
I did.
Yeah, exactly. Antennas. Yeah, and somebody in your life had one. Like my friend was joking. I was on his sort of podcast about the business a couple weeks ago. And I was saying, you know what actually the worst invention was? Like you were saying, Jay, people are talking about this and that, but it's the smartphone. I think the smartphone, I think you're right. The smartphone changed more stuff than anybody has any idea.
It did.
Yep.
But the one I was saying was the remote control. Like when whoever, the Sony Trinitron came out, and remember those old ones were like, it made a big click and there were like 3 buttons on it or whatever. But the point is that you could stay in your chair and change the channel was a nightmare, because if you're running CBS, the whole point was we suck them in with one show and then they spend 4 hours watching CBS, because the idea of standing up and going over and turning the channel
half hour,
that's fucking insane. I'm not doing that. I remember my buddy in college used to say, he used to call his little brother the remote.
Oh yeah.
And he'd be like, where's the remote? And I'm like, what are you talking about? We're in our college dorm. He's like, my little brother's the remote. He's got to be over here. Like, he'll get up and go change the channel. So all that kind of stuff, it happens, it goes by, and then you don't really think about what's happening,
I was a remote, and I'm still traumatized by that 60 minutes clock. Yeah.
There you go.
Well, Chris, we appreciate you joining us again. We wanted to have you on just to kind of check in and,
Well,
see
I
what we're doing.
appreciate you guys thinking about me. It's pretty hairy time. It's been really fun to get to talk about some of it with people I know who care about other people and even me. And I love what you guys are doing. So anytime I can come on, and I can't wait to hear what you think about the Oscars, because I don't really understand it this year.
Yeah, it seems like it's a lot up in the air. Like that's why I was curious about if you were still a voter, because there doesn't seem to be, even if you look at like Golden Globes, SAG, and BAFTAs, the winners have been all over the place,
Yeah,
except for a
because
couple consistent winners, but they've been pretty inconsistent really with the winners. So,
and a lot of them, except for Wicked, which nobody thinks will win, and it are not movies that were popular.
right.
It's almost like it's become this little club. It's like, they used to joke when we were in high school, if you had an AV club, those were like the film geeks that would show the movies you never wanted to see anyway, right? And then all of a sudden it got cool where you're like, wait, they're showing cool movies. I want to hang out in the AV club, right? And I think somehow the industry, the Oscars, we've become the AV club again. We're valuing stuff nobody even understands what we're valuing. And I'm not saying the movies aren't good. I like Conclave. I like Honora is fascinating. I love the Russian guy in it.
I've probably seen none of them. Nothing.
Yeah.
Conclave I liked, yeah.
Wicked.
But I don't know that that's the best movie of the year. You know what I mean? I use now my example I say is when Good Will Hunting was nominated for an Oscar, the other ones were all movies I'd seen that I really liked. There was L.A. Confidential, another big thriller with movie stars. There was a Jack Nicholson, Helen Hunt movie called As Good as It Gets.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The one that sort of slipped in was The Full Monty, which was a British comedy, but I'd recommend The Full Monty right now to anybody who wanted to laugh and have a good time. It's a funny movie, right? And it's a rah-rah, have fun in a theater movie. And then the winner was Titanic. Literally the movie that until Avatar was the biggest box office success ever, right? And then Us, which I think you would say was a relatively warm-spirited commercial buddy sort of story, right? Like we were probably the most independent of all those movies, except maybe
that movie. Still though, that Good Will Hunting, like my kids love it.
No, I know. Matt and Ben hit on something. They did a great job. And the thing is, though, when you think about those 5 movies, you're like, I could basically recommend all of them. I could say to anyone, you'd enjoy seeing them. The year when Shakespeare in Love, which was all, supposedly independent, beat Saving Private Ryan, that was a change. But still, both of those are like commercial movies. One's a romance in the old Shakespearean theater. The other one's a war movie. Like, it doesn't... It's gotten weird for even me, and I get how they're getting made, and I like that they get made, but it's just strange.
Is that this weekend?
Yep, Sunday.
Do you go? Do you go to it?
I'm not going to go to it. Hopefully, I'll be going to the NESCAC basketball finals because Wesleyan, my son's team, will be in it. But
very nice.
We'll see.
Very nice.
No jinx.
No jinx.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll catch you next time on Eastern Shore Talk. Take care, guys.